Good day. Welcome to Ranso's Weekly Wraps. I'm Viv Govender, and this week we'll cover the following stories. The latest interest rate announcements from South Africa, what's been happening with Nvidia. The results just came out, and we're going to look at what that means for our market going forward. And then we'll also have a brief discussion about Trump's cabinet, which is basically taking shape and what it might mean for global markets. So let's start off with South Africa's interest rate announcement. As I discussed, or speak to you right now, we have not had those results being released just yet, but it's pretty much expected to be 0.25%. Now, let's look at why it's going to be 0.25% and what the arguments are for it maybe being a bit higher than that, a 0.5% cut. Well, our latest interest rate, inflation number came out and it was below 3%. This is obviously well below our target level, which is 3 to 6%. And the midpoint of our target, of course, is 4.5%. And some people are saying that right now 4.5% is the actual target. That 3 to 6% range is not really where we expect to be. So the fact that inflation is significantly below that would make you think that, given the economy we have in South Africa, with a very high unemployment rate, with a very low growth rate, that we would actually have a argument for cutting by 0.5%. But I would argue against that for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the inflation number that came out was primarily lowered by things that are quite cyclical, notably like fuel and food. And the fuel price is likely to increase next month. We are talking about going up a few cents, but obviously that's going to reverse some of the inflation gains we've had. The rand is weakened, to about just over 18 as I speak to you. And then, of course, we are also looking at food being quite volatile as well. But the main reason I think that we should not be trying to surprise the market with a 0.5% cut versus 0.25% cut, when that's kind of what the market expects, is that we are South Africa. We're a small country with a very open currency. Instability, any kind of surprise, is likely to increase the amount of uncertainty around our currency, which is the main reason that we don't perform as well over the long term versus some of the mature countries out there. And in fact, if you had to look at South Africa's currency, just how volatile it is compared to, say, developed markets, you would say we're kind of volatile currency because we often have movements 5-6%, that are almost out of nowhere. That's the rand plus, basically, rand versus dollar, or basically rand versus pound or something. That is not something you'd see normally with, like, versus the euro and the dollar, or the pound and the dollar. The market does, obviously pay greater attention to those economies. And if we had to have, for instance, a surprise there, the market would take the time to go and look at why that surprise was occurring. And, maybe, for instance, if we were cutting interest rates by 0.5%, they could argue, oh, this is salutary, this is going to help our economy, and therefore let's make the currency stronger, even though it's a surprisingly high interest rate cut. That's unlikely to happen in South Africa. We are a smaller country. The amount of nuance that the markets expect from us, or give us, in fact, is quite limited. So if we do try to surprise the market and cut it by 0.5%, what's likely to happen is the currency is likely to weaken. A weaker currency will translate into higher oil prices, higher cost of imported goods, which all makes inflation come back stronger than it had been before. So in that scenario, you'd be basically taking away the reason you were cutting interest rates by such a large amount anyway, because inflation would be rising, and therefore you'd probably have to reverse your decision. So I think going for the more stable, going for the more middle of the road kind of situation where you're cutting by 0.25%, but the market expects you to do so, probably makes more sense than cutting by 0.5%. Even though, like I said, inflation seems to be well below the target level at the moment. I think that's the smart thing, the prudent thing to do. The next thing we look at is what's happening with Donald Trump's cabinet. Now, Trump has put in some really eccentric people there. Not a joke. If you watch the WWE, the wife of Vince McMahon is going to be the head of education in the US. Linda McMahon. If you watch, Fox News, there's a number of Fox News anchors and Fox News people. The head of the Department of Defense from Fox News, a number of economic advisors from Fox News. The most controversial, however, announcement has been a guy called Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz is a congressman at the moment, and he's been basically put in charge of the U.S. Justice Department. He's going to be the Attorney General of the United States of America if it goes through. Now, why is this such an unusual pick? Firstly, his qualifications are not great. he's kind of qualified, but he's not like supremely qualified to redo this job. But the main thing is his character, at least the assumption or the allegations against his character. Most notably, there's been allegations that he's engaged in activities with underage ladies, including paying them for stuff and so on. It's been investigated by the law enforcement of the US and found not to be worth having a charge. But these kind of allegations obviously have a stay that very few other things do, and therefore that's kind of sticking to him at the moment. There's also been a investigation while he was in Congress about what the reality behind this was. That investigation is now under wraps because he's left Congress. He kind of resigned from his position when he was nominated, and so that investigation is obviously under wraps, and there's some argument with whether or not it should be released or not to the public. Now, you may wonder, why would Trump do this? Why would Trump put somebody so extreme up for such an important position when, he has this cloud over him? It's not like this cloud emerged after he was nominated. This was known for many, many years, that this was a thing that was, obviously a dark cloud on his reputation. So there's a couple of arguments to be made here. Firstly, maybe Trump is just, insane and he wants to put anybody out there. I don't fall for that. I don't think that you can say Trump is a madman. You don't get to be president of the United States twice. You don't get to have the greatest political comeback in history, in the US, by being a total idiot and not understanding how to, manipulate the system. The argument here is that what he could be doing is he could be basically using Matt Gaetz as kind of like a decoy, put him up on the thing on the list. Everybody focuses on Matt Gaetz, and then some other people, for instance, the person that's the head of the Defense Department, which, like I said, was a Trump, it was a Fox News, person, just basically a commentator. He had served in the military, but he was not a general, which you usually expect from these kind of, positions. Tulsi Gabbard, who has been accused of being a supporter of Putin, and like Linda McMahon, like I talked about, the Department of Education, etc. These kind of people would probably have an easier time because so much energy would be focused on Matt Gaetz. That's number one. Number two, maybe he actually thinks he can get Matt Gaetz through. And what does that mean? Well, if he does do that, right now, remember, Trump is at his highest political capital. It's only going to diminish over time. He's going to become a lame duck president. That means he's not going to have a second term. That means that people are not going to have to worry about him much in the second half of of this term, because you only have a year or two left, and what can he do to you if he's not going to be around anymore? You can't run for president again after that. Hopefully, Trump might try to change that. But what is the fear that you generate? Not much. However, at the moment, Trump basically is running very high. He's being basically said to be the reason that Republicans got the Senate back and maintained the House, and of course got the presidency. So they have a trifecta. And so if you basically are a Republican, you don't want to be messing with him right now at the peak of his power. And if he's able to get Matt Gaetz through at this kind of situation, well, he has a couple of things firstly done. He proves that he's got the power in the Republican Party. But also, Matt Gaetz is likely to be super loyal to Trump, considering just the kind of, like I said, the shadow he is under and what Trump has done for him. You can pretty much expect the Justice Department to be significantly more amenable to any Trump suggestion than Merrick Garland was to Joe Biden. And that, I think, is also quite a powerful thing, because it does mean that we could be seeing prosecutions of people like, for instance, people that were involved in prosecuting Trump. There's been talks about basically going after the district attorneys that prosecuted him in New York. There's been talk about going after people in the CIA, people in the FBI, etc., criminally for what Trump believes to be misdeeds, etc. And of course, there's also the advantage that any kind of friend of the president would have less chance of being prosecuted for something. And so we might be seeing, for instance, a number of cases against people that are currently being investigated by the Justice Department that are on Trump's side or considered to be friends of Trump, kind of disappear. So that's the kind of argument here. It goes all the way from he doesn't know what he's doing to very Machiavellian, very cunning, etc. I personally don't know. But one thing I do know is that the amount of attention that Matt Gaetz is attracting from the public, it's being talked about on talk shows or whatever. If he does get through, Trump has proven without a doubt that he controls the Republican Party. And even if he doesn't go through, if people like Tulsi Gabbard, Linda McMahon, all the other people we talked about do go through, while the market or all the politicians are distracted by Matt Gaetz, or think get rid of Matt Gaetz, at least we've proven we've done something. But then we can't get rid of everything he has because, because we are still Republicans. Because remember, this is going to be going through a Republican Senate. The Republicans own the Senate at the moment. They have 53 out of 100 votes. They have 53 to 47. And in fact, if you look at the fact that, J.D. Vance has the deciding vote, so they could lose, 3 votes and, be 50-50. And he would still basically be able to, choose whoever he wants to because of the deciding vote by his vice president. So, looking at what we have right now, we need to see how this confirmation goes. Oh, and there's one final thing on the confirmations as well. There's what's called recess appointments, and he's trying to get even beyond just pushing stuff through the Senate and whatever. There's a facility where the president can appoint somebody without the Senate's approval if it's done during a recess. And he wants to have these recess appointments basically being pushed through. So he doesn't even want to go through the process in some cases of actually looking at whether or not the Senate would say yes or no to these people and just say these are my people. I'm the president. That's what I want. Okay. Now let's look at Nvidia's results and what does this mean for the AI sector going forward. Nvidia released results on Wednesday. There were spectacular results, but the market expected more than spectacular. Remember, Nvidia is the most valuable company in the world. It's more valuable than Apple. It's more valuable than Microsoft. The only other 2 companies that are in the $3 trillion club. Okay, and the rise of Nvidia has been spectacular. It's the amount of growth we've seen from this company, the amount of revenue it's generating every quarter is unbelievable, and the growth rate of that revenue is also unbelievable. To give you an idea, Nvidia is generating like about 30 billion in revenue at the moment. It's going up to 37 billion they expect for this 4th quarter of this year. And this is a company that's only been making a couple billion a quarter just a couple of years ago. Massive uptick. So you don't find a company usually with this kind of revenue coming in and this kind of growth rate as well in that revenue. So in that scenario, you would think, okay, great. But like I said, the most valuable company in the world, the valuation of this company is insane. So $3.5 trillion. And in that situation, you need to have unbelievable results in order to basically have the stock react positively or instinctively positively. And unfortunately, Nvidia's results were just very, very good, but not spectacularly good. But like I said, they're still expecting great earnings coming through in the next quarter. They're still expecting demand to exceed supply going forward. So it's still a very good company. But what can we see from the results that we have from Nvidia, and what can we talk about in terms of AI going forward? Firstly, the fact that demand exceeds supply means that people are spending unbelievable amounts of money on AI at the moment. In fact, the expectations are of about $250 billion, and about $250 billion range next year. And in total, between this year and 2027, $1 trillion with a T by just the 5 biggest towards hyperscalers out there is expected to be spent. Now, a lot of that money is going to go to Nvidia. And so one thing you must understand is Nvidia is involved in the AI hype or whatever, but Nvidia is earning real money because it's selling real things. The people that are taking the risks are actually people like Amazon and people like Google and people like Facebook and Microsoft, etc. Because these people are buying the Nvidia products and they're trying to make something and make money off that. Nvidia is just selling it already at the moment. It's actually making the money right now. It's not a speculation that Nvidia is basically going to make money in the future. No, they're actually making money right now. Of course, to justify $3.5 trillion, you need more than just money right now. You need a lot of money in the future as well. So that has to be obviously taken into account. But understand, for Nvidia, a lot of this growth is like really, really like solid because it's already happened. The question then arises is a couple of things. What are the dangers to Nvidia? So there's 2 dangers. One is the fact that we could be seeing a competitor come about. You normally don't have super profits in a open economy, because when some companies making too much money, like Nvidia seems to be making at the moment, normally what happens is competitors come in and try to compete. Will be the competitors to Nvidia, AMD, Intel, etc. None of them have been quite able to crack Nvidia's basically secret sauce. Not to say they couldn't. Nvidia basically just has like an IP, intellectual property kind of protection. It doesn't have like facilities that are physical that have to be built, or access to certain materials that nobody else has access to. It's basically brain power, patents, ideas, and so on that makes Nvidia special. And that obviously can be overtaken by companies more easily than, for instance, having the only mine of that particular resource in the world, etc. And the next thing to worry about is whether or not the AI boom is coming to a stop. And I've talked about this before. We are very soon, over the next couple of months, going to be getting new AI models coming out. We need to see what the improvement of these models are going to be like. Right now, it does seem that there has been some slowdown in terms of these models, in terms of their ability to grow, even though we have seen them being continuously more efficient. That being said, as more and more brain power is attracted to the AI sphere, we are getting more and more innovation coming through. And there's been developments in these models that are quite interesting. And in fact, there's certain tests that were done or said to be things that AI couldn't do and probably wouldn't be able to do for quite some time a year ago, that now they're passing quite well. One is called an ARC test by a guy called Francois Cholet, where you basically have a very limited amount of information and you're supposed to draw patterns from it or deduce patterns from it. The average human scores in the mid-60s. A good human, a smart human, scores about 90 plus. Most of these programs have not scored above 50, 40, 30, like that. The latest tools models are scoring basically at about the mid-60s, just about 63, 64. And there are also certain tests. For instance, there is a famous, a Jan LeCun had a test where he says, imagine you have a certain amount of gears and you turn one gear and what's the effect on the seventh gear going to be? And right now it seems that these models have somehow passed some level of reasoning that they can actually answer this question. So we are getting some kind of progress coming through. However, there is a belief that the traditional LLM model may be under pressure. But like I said, there's one thing to be noted about this. These models, the technology behind them, GPT-4 and so on, was developed when you had a small cadre of very smart scientists like Geoffrey Hinton and so on working on the problem of AI. For the majority of scientists, they probably looked at AI like kind of alien detection, the search for alien intelligence. Interesting, but not something you want to devote your career to because you're likely end up doing nothing. But now with the amount of money coming into AI, with the amount of money being focused on this particular field, like the 180 IQ people that are working on string theory, the people that are working on some high level of mathematics, etc., a lot of them are going to be focusing their minds on AI because, firstly, interesting problem, okay, and the second thing is a lot of money going to be available. If you're just a normal high-end researcher, you're going to make millions a year. But if you somehow basically are able to get your research in some way enough to start a company or to give you a share of a company, you could be making hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. And so that's very attractive, a very interesting problem, and very high rewards. And so I would suspect that right now we have significantly higher brain power working on the problem of AI than we had even 2 or 3 years ago. And in that scenario, I would be very nervous to predict that any kind of current bottleneck is going to last. Okay, that's it for this week. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to speaking to you guys again next week. Cheers.